Hello everybody, I'm Matt Anderson and welcome to The Road Not Taken, how ordinary people get out of their own way and you can too. I'm very excited today to welcome fear scientist Mary Poffenroth, who's here from the west coast of the USA. And Mary, if you'd just like to say a few words to the listeners by means of introduction.
Sure, yeah, thank you for having me. I think this is such an important topic as we continue to learn how to live better with our own brains. So like you said, I'm here on the west coast of California. The sunshine is wonderful. It finally came in. And a little bit about my work is it's important to take a look at fear in a non-clinical way. So recently, we've started to really dive into, many people call it positive psychology, but really it's about how do you have better health and wellness before it gets to a pathological condition. So what I do is I really focus my research and my outreach on the everyday fears that we all have. So everything in the middle. So nothing that's going to be on the extremes of, let's say, clinical anxiety or clinical phobias, but the stuff that pretty much all of us are dealing with every day.
Okay, perfect. And then, just for the purpose of audience, you've got a pretty impressive resume in terms of work you've done for TEDx and Forbes and SXSW. Is that got a different name, or is that how it's pronounced? Is it?
Yeah, so it's South by Southwest, which was just recently in March, and South by Southwest has grown into, oh man, I don't even know how to describe it. It's technology, it's art, it's music, it's science, it's education. It's become this huge melting pot where everyone convenes in Austin to really figure out how we can be better humans in lots of different ways.
Okay, perfect. And then just a couple of other things. So again, those listening, so Mary's she's a fear scientist and researcher and lecturer at San Jose State University, and she's got 2 masters and completes a PhD next year. So that's certainly good enough. Also the author of the book Write, Present, Create. Mary, my first question for you, I guess, first of all, I want to start about, obviously you've got your own story. Presumably there's got to be reasons why you're interested in this subject. I'm sure it just certainly didn't come out of the blue. So for you, what was, tell about the day when you felt like you kind of wanted to take your life in a different direction, that perhaps it had hit quite a low point and you were determined to get out of your own way. Can you kind of tell us about that day?
Well, absolutely. And it was before I started teaching at San Jose State, so we're in the year 2007, and I had just finished my first master's and was working for a nonprofit startup. So the nonprofit had a great mission. It was putting schools into underprivileged areas in the Bay Area of California. But what I was doing for the nonprofit was completely different than anything I went to school for or that I was passionate about. I was in the accounts payable department. So it was such a hard thing that I knew that I was making really good money. It was a full-time job, benefits. The economy wasn't doing great in 2007. So I really had this amazing job that lots of people would have killed for, and I was desperately unhappy. I wasn't doing what I went to school for, which was biology and science. I wasn't doing something that I was passionate about, even though the company had a great mission. I never was someone that wanted to do accounting. And what had happened up until I found myself in that pivot point was I started to have really severe pain in the tailbone. And I went to every doctor, from Western doctors to acupuncture to chiropractic, and had x-rays and MRIs, you name it. No one could figure out what was going on. I hadn't fallen. I didn't snowboard. No one knew why I was having even just trouble sitting down, of having this immense tailbone pain. And so I kind of started to think about my life more holistically and knew I really wasn't doing the things that I wanted to do, and knew that work, we spend 40 to 60 hours in our job, and I felt, okay, at that point I was 27 years old, and I knew that I had to make a change, and this opportunity came up to start at one class, just teaching one single course, and this means a huge pay difference, and having to take this big leap into the unknown. That in that moment, I knew that if I left this very cushy, safe, comfortable job that I was good at.
Mm-hmm.
And I could spend the rest of my life doing that accounting and knowing that I would still be serving a higher purpose for the company. It wasn't what I was meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
And taking that big leap, deciding, okay, here's this opportunity that I don't really know where it's going to lead, but I have to do something. And I took that leap, and almost practically overnight, the tailbone pain disappeared.
Wow.
Like, that job was a literal physical manifestation of a pain in my ass.
Mm-hmm.
and it's never returned.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that was a sure sign that even if it wasn't that opportunity that was going to be my life's work, I knew that I started having to listen to my body, that we have physical manifestations of our mental state. And I think we're starting to dive more into that and having that be more of a mainstay in our conversations. Yeah. But for so long, we thought that the mind and body were so separate, they could just function independently, which is kind of ridiculous. And so I knew I needed to start listening to my body. And also I really made a deal with myself. I needed to start making bigger risks, calculated risks, but bigger risks if I really wanted to get to this idea of the life that I want.
So how much of it comes down to pain, or the extent of pain that gets people to take action? Because one of the things I really want to focus on with our conversation, Mary, today is around, well, as we described the topic, is around taking the big leap. Because, well, let me put some context to this, because this is relevant for everybody listening as well. You know, one of the biggest surprises I had last year was I went through, I spent a number of days going through my LinkedIn contacts, and there's a couple thousand plus. Not that's it. The relevancy of that is only in that it was so many people where I couldn't help but notice how, even if whether I'd known the person 3 years or 7 years or 15 years, I was blown away by how the vast majority of them were still in exactly the same place they'd been when I first met them. And what's more painful to concede is that quite a good number of those people were people that had hired me to coach them to, get to the next level. And it seemed like many of them anyway, it had been a positive relationship, and I was under the impression that they were taking good steps. And again, obviously, there's many reasons why people, I guess, do take big steps in life. But it was pretty gutting and shocking to see how the vast majority of people were still at whatever it was, associate vice president, or they were still at, some kind of like not the level they'd wanted to get to. And so therefore I just want to focus, specifically as much as we can on, what it takes or the different strategies and ideas to help people take that leap, because you've had it. And some of the other people I've talked to, some of them had really dramatic things happen to them. That one guy broke his neck in a water skiing accident, and then some people have had horrendous trauma as children, or they had severe alcohol problems or depression problems, but something pushed them to say, right, this is enough. Like, I can't take this anymore. It's having too negative of an impression. So, and it's a very long-winded preamble, but I also want to put some context for everyone listening to as well. I want to steer our conversation, given your expertise. You were clearly in a ton of pain, and you had a good opportunity, and yet it still took immense courage to do it. But talk about other people. Like, what does your research find? And obviously, you teach classes on this as well. For people listening that are stuck or definitely aspire to significantly more, do they have to have a pain in the ass, significant pain in the tailbone, and a great opportunity come along? Talk about the types of things that help other people.
Yeah, motivating humans is both paradoxically simple and complex. We don't like pain, but we also don't like change. And so we will tolerate a lot of pain if it means that we don't have to change. Mm-hmm. And this is, it's what I try to talk about in my workshops and my talks is so much of it is just the evolution of our brains. And it is to be human. And so the strategies come into play to kind of neurohack your human capabilities, to kind of trick your brain into not waiting until you're at rock bottom in order for change to occur, when you have no other choice but to change or die. And that happens a lot to people, especially with people that have used addictive types of things for coping mechanisms. That their brain doesn't want to change until that's the only option left. So how do we get people before they hit rock bottom? I think is really part of the heart of your question.
Okay, yeah.
And it's I mean, this is a very complex question, but here's a couple of my takeaways on it. Number one, it's shifting your framing of how you're seeing the situations in your life. Mm-hmm. So we will move towards things that we find enjoyable, and we'll move away from things that we find unenjoyable. So is there a way that you can shift your perspective to see the things that will help you get to where you say that you want to go, and see those as enjoyable experiences instead of drudgery? Mm-hmm. Part of this comes to aligning what you say you want with, is it really what you want? I'm sure you see a lot of this in your work, that people will say, oh, okay, I want to, classic easy one is weight loss. I want to lose 50 pounds. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're saying this is your goal, yet your behaviors are not aligned with that goal because you're not working out, or you're not making good food choices, or you're not getting good sleep habits. So the everyday habits and behaviors that you're choosing and you're actively choosing are not really supporting the big goal that you have. So kind of aligning that, and how can you make those little steps towards those big goals that you want? How can you shift that framing so it seems like an enjoyable thing? Let's take vegetables. It's around lunchtime for me, and I haven't had lunch yet, so there might be a lot of food analogies and metaphors today. So it's, like vegetables generally, a lot of them, especially green vegetables right off the vine, not really that tasty, but you add flavoring and you add your cooking abilities to them. You make them good because it's good for you. Mm-hmm. So how can you do that with the behaviors you need to get to the C-suite, or the behaviors you need to start your own company, so that your brain starts to get retrained that these are enjoyable activities. They're not like, oh, I got to do this thing, because we're not going to do it if we hate it. If we see a value like, okay, I'm getting paid monetary value for doing this drudgery, but I see the exact monetary value, then we can push through. Mm-hmm. But it's something like being an entrepreneur, and there is no guarantee that all of your work is going to pay off in any way, right, then you need to enjoy that work for it to happen.
Okay, so first step then is to sort of focus on looking differently at what it is how you're thinking about things, to sort of start to see some of the more positive things that can happen, and maybe some of the cool and exciting things that could happen potentially as well, rather than just focusing on the things that currently have you stuck in not wanting to do it. Yeah.
And you can just focus on one thing. So since I study fear, we'll use fear as an example.
Yes, please do.
Fear is one of those things that even the word fear, a lot of people will run away from just the word fear, and which is it's hilarious to me that our human minds and our socializations around fear have gotten so just tangled up. For example, like if you look at just the basic human emotions, kind of like you would have your primary colors. There's some schools of thought will say 4, some say 6. I use 4 because it's usually a lot easier for people to remember. So we have 4 basic human emotions. And those 4 basic human emotions go into creating all of the different spectrum of colors of emotions that we're able to feel and express as humans. And one of those basic human emotions, of course, is fear. And so when we tell people to be fearless, which is nearly biologically impossible, mm-hmm, we're telling people to not be human. We're telling people, hey, maybe you should stop breathing and stop going to the bathroom. It's so silly when you think about it. Yet that is the messaging we're constantly being bombarded with of be fearless, don't feel the fear, do all the magic things. And what ends up happening is people are still afraid, because telling someone to be fearless, not really helpful. So instead you just kind of like shove it down and you pretend like it doesn't exist. Or you get some of those unhealthy coping mechanisms, like drugs and alcohol or all the other things we can get addicted to. Mm-hmm. And then you don't feel like anyone else feels that fear but you. which is really isolating and lonely and starts the whole process all over again. So changing the conversation about fear is going to be important. Some of the world's top leaders are very direct and very adamant about talking about fear and saying, yeah, of course I'm afraid. If we're not all afraid, then we're not doing our job, which is a famous quote from Ed Catmull, Pixar. That if you're trying to do something new, you should be afraid.
Yeah. Oh, this is fantastic. It's interesting. It's so funny. I always preface this when I'm talking to women because I don't like gender-related questions, but it seems to me that when I interview women on this topic, that they are more comfortable just saying what you just said, that it's, that we should be talking about our fears more, and it's actually healthy. Like one of the more recent people I interviewed, she made this fantastic insight about, just talking about your fears to someone you really trust, so they come back to you and say, well, that's completely ridiculous, why on earth would you think that? And just how healthy it was to hear that from someone else, so that you don't think you're alone with your fears, and that you actually, can stop stewing about them. And as she said that to me, I remember thinking, gosh, I never do that. And then I thought, I don't even write about that in my journal much. I'm just thinking, that's ridiculous. Like, I'm not even talking to myself about things I'm afraid of. So, and this is true. So in the last couple of weeks, I have started to do that several times, actually. Because I thought, because I wanted to learn from her. I mean, she's had great success in life, and I just thought, well, that makes a ton of sense. And it has. I mean, again, it's very anecdotal and short term, but I just find it funny that I just interviewed someone earlier today, a man, where this topic didn't come up at all. And anyway, so this whole notion I've done. Anyway, so my question would be: Do you see a different way, not in terms of how men and women handle, how they cope with fear, or not?
I think that there's definitely a difference in socialization and messaging around fear for Western nations, or what we collectively call kind of like First Nations, highly developed nations like the U.S., UK, Europe, and that messaging is, if you are identifying as male, then there's this archetype of toughness, and in the UK, stiff upper lip, and you don't cry, you don't show emotion because that's a sign of weakness. If you're looking back at, a long time of human history, we used to send our boys off to slaughter other boys and men in war. And so emotions were always a liability, because how can you feel human when you're being asked to take human life in such a traumatic way? Right. And as we progress as a society, we don't want to keep doing that. We're trying to move forward, so we're not having these horrendous wars, even though conflict is really inherently part of what it is to be human as well, and it's kind of changing how we have conflict. It's not that conflict and difference is bad, it's just when we start, taking it out into the long, visceral scale of hand-to-hand combat and wars. But in terms of fear, we needed the masses to be able to not talk about those things, because we needed them to go off and kill one another. And as we move to being a society that doesn't want that anymore, that we want more peace, and how can we have prosperity, and that means that we have to shift how we're socializing our children, and change the messages that we got socialized now that we're adults, and that's going to be a practice. And when you look at really successful people, like the Catmulls and the Bransons, these are going to be leaders that have figured out their own fear stuff, that they can't be an effective leader that is going to be a disruptor and an innovator if they're so stuck in their head with all of these fear stories that they've been telling themselves. And with humans, we have a thing called mirror neurons, that when someone is in fear, we can tell, even if they're not admitting it. So if you have a leader that is so afraid of either failing, or that the company's not doing well, or whatever is going on in that leader's head, their team is going to pick up on it. And that's going to lead to, a lack of team cohesion. It's going to lead to a lack of trust because their mouth is saying, yeah, everything's great, everything's perfect. But their body is saying, oh my gosh, I'm totally freaking out. So it's an authentic leadership style to push into that fear.
So are you saying then that typically people are very successful and more self-aware of their fears than most people? In other words, it would be a good exercise for anyone listening to take a bit of time to think on that.
Yeah, it's, success is that funny word that encapsulates a lot of things, but it lacks distinct definition until you start talking about it. Sure. So, are you talking about a successful leader financially successful, or that is thought of as a good leader even though they have a company that's only 10 people? Are we talking about successful leaders on the global scale? I think that if you want to combine leadership and innovation, then part of that success definition has to be some really deep self-reflection, because how can you lead a healthy, fully functioning, strong, vibrant team if you aren't those things yourself? Mm-hmm. And to do that work is gross. It's icky. No one likes it because it's hard. And if it was easy, then everyone would do it. But if you say that you want to transform an industry, it's not really fair to say you want to transform the industry if you're not even willing to transform yourself.
And then where does the piece come in about not fueling fears? So in other words, because one of the things I think where I've got my own way over the years is I've repressed, concerns and fears, because I thought, well, if I talk about them, it's going to fuel them, and I'm going to, focus on them even more. I'd rather just somehow ignore them. And again, this is self-deceit probably going on, but that somehow I figured therefore I would make faster progress. So is there a balance to that? Because I am hearing you say, you don't want to feel alone with your fears, it's good to talk about them, but what's the healthy boundary around that?
Yeah, and it's definitely, you want to be cognizant of who you're talking to, and know your audience. If you're a male leader doing an all hands for your company of 300 people, maybe not the right time to talk about your fear of erectile dysfunction. Probably not the right forum, right? So obviously it's going to be appropriate time, appropriate place, appropriate group of people. But within that, starting with yourself is, humans love to pigeonhole. We love to box things. When we put things in boxes, it makes sense for us, and our mind can categorize a really complex world so that we can kind of get a handle on things. Right. So within that, it's good to start by really recognizing what that fear is and say, okay, is this what I call a factual fear or a fictional fear? So a factual fear is in the moment, it is part of the shared reality that other people are having, and it is something that is a threat to your life or threat to the happiness, health, and well-being of others. Mm-hmm. So, you weren't paying attention because you're on your phone and you stepped out in the crosswalk and you almost got hit by a bus. Okay, that instant, oh my gosh, that's factual fear. Like the bus almost hit you, mm-hmm. and now you felt that rush of adrenaline. It's like, oh my gosh, I almost died, and that's very factual. Everyone saw it. It all exists in the same shared reality. That's not what we really need to deal with on a daily basis, and that's not the type of fear that is really destroying our health and happiness. The type of fear that's destroying our health and happiness is going to be that fictional fear. So with just like books, sometimes fictions have a truth grain in there that they're based on some sort of true story, but a lot of it is just made up. And that's kind of like those fictional fears where either messaging we got when we were kids, you're not good at math, or, someone said something offhand, or we have told ourselves this story some way, shape, or form, and we keep telling ourselves this story, mm-hmm. that, I'm not athletic enough to be a runner. I'm not tall enough to play basketball, after school, but whatever it is. And as we continue those fear stories, those are the ones that we have the most ability to have influence on. So really deciding, okay, and this is part of what I teach in my workshops, is the RIA method. So recognize, identify, and address. So part of that recognizing is looking at, what does your individual body do when you're in fear? So fear is not like an on-off, it's like a gradient, and everyone reacts to fear in a little bit different physiological way, right? So like for me, I like clench my jaw, and I like scrunch my shoulders, and like, you know, I get like all like scrunched in like this. When I start to feel my muscles do that, then that is a physical indication, okay, what's going on? I'm having some fear reaction here. Let me dig a little deeper. Mm-hmm. Some people get sweaty palms. Some people, unfortunately, have to deal with digestive distress. We'll just leave it at that. Yeah. So, but recognizing what your body does so that you know, okay, I'm starting to ramp up and get into the fear zone. What's going on? Then you can ask yourself, is the thing that I'm freaking out about, is it based in reality, or is it based in a fiction that I've been telling myself? And then there's stuff in the middle that, let's say I'm walking alone at night in Los Angeles, I'm downtown, and I just get like a intuition feeling, right? I'm like, I probably shouldn't go down that street. Is it a reality-based fear, or is it a fictional fear? If it's something like that in the middle where you just have a choice not to go down that street, just don't go down that street. Just listen to your intuition and don't worry about it. But it's the things that we keep telling ourselves that are keeping us up at night of, I'm afraid of failing, so I'm not going to try. The now famous FOMO. I'm afraid that other people are doing way better stuff and a lot cooler stuff than me. I feel like an imposter. Yeah. Because I feel that I'm not good enough, or that I'm not in control of this situation. So those are the ones we really need to massage the practice on, because those are going to have the biggest impact for our success.
And those what you were talking about at the beginning, about everyday fears. Is that right?
Yep, everyday stuff. So it's, kind of coming back to that idea of how do we reframe so our brain thinks it's something positive, is, someone allows you the opportunity to join a project, and you're the most junior person on that team. And you walk into the room for the first kind of meet and greet, and the story going through your head is probably like, why am I here? Maybe they made a mistake. I don't think they know how green I am. I probably shouldn't be here. And you're having all this internal dialogue instead of allowing yourself to be present and contribute. So right away, you're already like kind of devaluing your participation because you're so caught up in your story of inferiority. And accepting that literally everyone feels that way, doesn't matter how senior you get. Mm-hmm. Like if you're doing it right, you keep wanting to be the greenest person in that room, because that means that you're going to keep growing. And those people that you find are either more skilled, more experienced, have new ideas, they're going to push you way more than if you just constantly surround yourself with people that are not quite to the level you're at. So that feeling's never going to go away, right? But then thinking of it, okay, I'm 15, 20 years into my job. I'm really good at what I do. I got this new opportunity. That's a growth opportunity. And I feel, I had this sensation before where I feel like I'm out of my league. This is exactly where I need to be. Right. And search out that feeling of, oh my gosh, everyone is like way better than me here. Then oh, okay. So this is exactly what I need to be doing to get to where they're at. I need to be in the room talking with them. And I say, it's cool fear. You're never going to go away, but you're not driving the bus.
So you call it cool fear? Is that right?
It's just like kind of like an analogy, I think that, or a metaphor that writer Elizabeth Gilbert had in one of her books that talked about, like you're on a car trip, and fear is going to be in the car because you're never going to get rid of fear, but you can't let fear drive the car. You can't let fear play the radio. Mm-hmm. It just gets to sit there and be quiet, and it gets acknowledged, like, I see you, fear, but you don't get to have any control over the decisions being made.
So one of the things that's popped into my head is it's an amalgam of different things you've said or that are going through my head. So because it sounds like you've got one of the things you're recommending is that people have a much healthier attitude towards, well, firstly what fear really is, but also in a way that they embrace it, or accept it, I suppose, accept that it exists, and then make sure it perfectly keeps a back seat. But then what engaged me was the idea about, we haven't talked about this, but you mentioned the imposter syndrome, but that you talked about the person that's feeling the green person in the room. And then, I just want to talk you through my train of thought. So then I thought, well, I bet everyone listening to this can relate to feeling new and uncomfortable in their role. But my experience with people, most of the time, is that then, in a way, it's almost like we're all, the goal is always to get comfortable. In other words, to get accomplished enough where you don't have to feel like the newbie at the networking event that's chronically uncomfortable and doesn't, stands out like a sore thumb. And so, and then I remember something you said earlier about, people are resistant to change, or I forget exactly what you said, people dislike change. It's almost like, so how do you, well, I almost want to ask you, have you had quite good success at continuing to have through your life a willingness to be somewhat uncomfortable? Because that's my impression, even though I don't know you at all. I've just read a couple of things about you, but clearly based on where you started in life, I almost get the impression that's something you've done a really good job with. Is that a fair comment?
It is a fair comment, and I think that comfort is definitely the enemy of growth.
Right.
But growth may not be the thing that makes you happy. So there's not a one-size-fits-all definition of success.
Right.
And I think the bigger question is, you have to really decide what is the ideal life that you would like to live.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the things that actually are going to make you happy? And maybe staying in that comfort zone and staying in the same job for 20 years, maybe that will make you happy, because if you don't have to worry about expanding on your job, then you can focus more of your energy to raising your kids and having a happy, healthy marriage. Maybe those things are important to you, and the job is just the job. It's to get the paycheck, to make sure ends meet, and you don't care about expanding your skills and getting out of that comfort zone because you have different priorities. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
If that makes you happy, then, don't listen to everyone saying, oh, you need to grow and expand and push yourself. But if your personality type, like me, I enjoy finding that razor's edge. I push myself out of my comfort zone because I'm kind of like a growth junkie. I build things, and once I feel I am kind of a master of that content, I kind of blow up the bridge and rebuild it, because that's exciting to me. Creating things and opportunities and content that has never been done in the way that I can create it is exciting to me. So that personally brings me happiness, but it doesn't mean that that's a recipe for everybody.
Right. I've got to ask this. I don't know how useful this is for anyone else, but where does your interest in the topic come from?
Yeah, no, and when I was thinking about how to answer that last question, of course I had my mom at the very forefront of it, because part of my desire to research fear is that I came from a very fear-drenched family. And my mom was a line worker, so she was an assembly woman. And the assembly line, you had pretty basic jobs. Now, those jobs hardly exist anymore because of robotics. But, she went to work, and she did her assembly line job, and she went home, and she raised her kids, and, took care of her family. So she got to clock out at 5 p.m., unlike me, because of how I created my life, I'm always thinking about stuff. So there's really no clocking out for an entrepreneur. There's no clocking out for a creator. You're always some way, shape, or form in the trenches with that thing that you do. Mm-hmm. So, you can make an argument for both sides. But with that, my mom was very afraid of everything. She basically thought, as soon as the kids leave the house, they're going to die. She never had a passport, so she never traveled globally. Really was just, same house, same town, and I knew that that wasn't the life that I wanted. Not to say that that life is bad if that makes you happy, but also a lot of, for me, I saw just how much fear destroyed my mom's life and made her, especially as she aged, become very, very insulated and really alienate herself from other people in her community. So I didn't want that for myself. And I knew that I needed to find pathways since I didn't learn them as a kid. I didn't learn them from my home ecosystem. Right. I needed to learn that stuff. And because I'm a lifelong academic, I hit the books. And originally my journey kind of started in a traditional research way, where I was just gathering information and gathering people's stories and seeing these different. Usually I would focus on kind of like female stories of women doing these like amazing things. I'm like, I want that. Like, sign me up. I want to be adventurous. I want to travel by myself. And like, that sounds amazing. And that's the kind of life that would give my mom a heart attack. That was not even an option. And so for me to get there, I knew I had to start dealing with my own fear stuff. I got to the more traditional, I've always been in the sciences, but I started looking at the science-based way of helping people learn these strategies, because there is a lot of like fluff in the self-development genre. A lot of times people, not always that is going to be harmful or trying to be, willfully harmful, but a lot of times there is information being shared and spread that isn't rooted in evidence. And part of that reason that it's so popular is because people have a desire to get better. People want to feel more empowered, and they want to feel healthier. Mm-hmm. But scientists, we're not really all that great at sharing with the public and talking with people outside of academia. So if you don't have anyone to turn to, and especially with women, a lot of times, traditionally, doctors haven't acknowledged women's pain and suffering. And so they'll turn to celebrities, or they'll turn to, manufactured gurus. And that can be a dangerous place too. So part of my work is getting that scientific evidence out in a way that's fun, engaging, palatable, and another option for people to help themselves be healthier.
Off the top of your head, can you think of some fluff examples or things that you've read that sort of you felt were kind of misleading to people?
Like Olive Goop.
What was it?
Olive Goop, Gwyneth Paltrow's company Goop. Oh. Yeah, where it's just a lot of pseudoscience and random stuff that is health advice, and a lot of it can be dangerous. And using one's celebrity to promote essentially modern day snake oil is a huge issue for me. I think that it's easy to get caught up in the packaging, and if you're having an issue that you're looking to have solved and the packaging is pretty enough, you're like, okay, sign me up. But you're spending time, money, effort, and possibly compromising your health and safety if those sources aren't reputable. So it's not a new problem, right. But it's definitely one that's become more pervasive with the digital age, because it's so much easier to make things that you can package and share. And
again, I don't know, this isn't a question for everybody's benefit necessarily, but I'm just curious, how old were you when you knew that you wanted your life to be about emboldening people?
Yeah, I would say I started as an undergrad. I remember having a professor, and she was a conservation biologist, and she was talking about and sharing some pictures of her research in the Amazon. And I just remember being so enthralled that I didn't really think that was an option for female scientists. I mean, of course, I grew up knowing about, Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall, but those were such iconic individuals that I didn't know normal people could do that. I thought that was like kind of this, like Amelia Earhart style person, and there was like one in a million, and so that it wasn't an accessible option for me. And that was the first time that I really saw that as an option of being a female that could travel internationally solo, be in the field and do these, sort of dangerous things and still be okay and come back to share the details of it. So I think that was like the first time that I knew that I wanted something for my life that was outside of what would be considered traditional for a woman. And that definition of what's traditional or acceptable for a woman to do professionally continues to change, and has changed rapidly over just like the last 10 years. So it's continuing to expand not only what we're allowed to do, but what we're encouraged to do, and the support to get us there, I think, is a really big piece of who's gonna help light that pathway to get you to where you want to go.
No, this is really interesting. I mean, I could talk more about that, but I want to make sure I keep things steered also towards things that people can apply that are listening to this as well. Although I think all of this does apply. I mean, I think of my daughter when you mentioned Jane Goodall, because we read a book. There's a book she really likes about her, and it's fascinating what you said about Jane Goodall being iconic, because it's funny. I'm doing this because I'm on a learning journey myself, and it's. You mentioned earlier people like Richard Branson, and they too, people like that for me cease to be human beings, because what they do just seems so incredible and so far removed from anything that I'd love to think I'd do it, but it's probably rather unrealistic. And I know people listening can easily, I'm not alone in feeling that way. So when you talk about people being more accessible, it's one of the things I love about this podcast is talking to real people, but they do concede flaws. As well as have great ideas for people, because it just makes it much more, I think, achievable for all of us. It's not just people we're reading about in books, and again, even that can be glossed over. Right? People are typically portrayed like they obviously share the most useful things that person has to share, rather than the fact that they were terrible spouses or awful with money or had drug problems or something like that. Talk about the relatively useful bit, and that's why I find this helpful. Because it just sort of brings, to use the word holistic, I suppose, it just brings the whole picture into place. But to steer back to sort of ideas, so we've talked about a lot of things really, and my notes are fair, but hard to read sometimes at a glance. But certainly, looking at things differently, sort of as you sort of about shifting how we're looking at the things that we're worried about, taking small steps, being clear about the specific habits perhaps that are involved in achieving a specific goal, and then taking small steps. I mean, that's a hugely valuable practical strategy. Talking about fears, so that we don't feel alone, that we don't feel like we're the only person that has these concerns, and acknowledging that people who are very accomplished in certain areas, it's typically something that they've done. Otherwise, other people would pick up on that fear and they'd cease to be credible leaders. Naming fears. To be more clear about what's an actual real fear versus a fictional one. And I'm just sort of recapping to sort of help also tell the story so far, and then paying attention to the physical symptoms, which is, I must admit, something, again, that I've barely ever crossed my mind to think about what that looks like, listening to our intuition. So those are some of the things you've talked about. And also acknowledging that fear isn't something that ever goes away completely, and that's okay. So that's where we are so far in terms of helping people with a bigger topic, which is making the big leap. So how much of that how much of it is about courage, and what other factors help people make a big leap in their life?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that they're very much aligned. Someone once asked me, what's the opposite of fear? And if I had to choose, I couldn't really choose one. I would say either calm or courage. That those are two very different things, but you can be afraid at the same time as you're acting courageous. So it's not that courage is the absence of fear, which is like a famous quote. It's that you are feeling fear and doing it anyway. I'm just full of famous quotes today. But part of that is it is a practice, and practicing and using that muscle all the time means that when there's a big opportunity, you're going to be accustomed to feeling that fear and doing it anyway. And that can be just small things on the daily. When you start to recognize those physical sensations, maybe you don't want to talk to a coworker, or you would rather not call someone, you would just rather text someone. When you start to feel like that anxiety about it, try and press into it and just practice of saying, okay, I'm recognizing that I'm, anxious or afraid or overwhelmed by this thing, and see if you can do it anyway. Because I think that, the disservice that we do is that we tell ourselves, oh yeah, I'll just, deal with that whole fear thing when something really important comes up. And then something really important comes up and we don't have the tools to deal with it. And then either we lose out on that opportunity, and then we go into a big cycle of shame and regret because we weren't ready, or we just completely, blow up that opportunity because we haven't gotten those really strong coping skills for handling that fear sensation in our body. So that's one piece. Another piece is having really quick strategies in your back pocket. I can hyperlink this for your listeners as well. Some of the things that I give my workshop participants includes what I call a fear wheel. And it has on it these different adjectives for all the different ways that we experience fear. So with fear, it's very different to say I'm feeling anxious versus I'm overwhelmed or I'm terrified. And it seems really, really easy. What I suggest people do is put this little JPEG on their phone so that everyone has their phone with them. And in the moment, when you're starting to feel that sensation and recognize that you are, in fact, starting into the fear zone, pull out your phone, pull out what I call the fear wheel, and give it an exact name. One of the big problems is people just call everything stress.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I'm stressed. You're stressed. Everyone's stressed. And we don't do anything about it, right? It's kind of one of those words that encapsulates so much it loses meaning. So words are power. And if we can give an exact word to the feeling we're feeling in that moment, that can help short circuit that very limbic system forward pathway to get us back into our logic. And just saying, okay, I feel overwhelmed. And then having strategies to address that. So when I'm overwhelmed, reaching out to someone to take some things off my plate will help me feel less overwhelmed. Or it could be is it really actually that you're terrified? If that's a very extreme emotion, ask yourself, is it warranted? Something like your wife or husband was supposed to be home from work at 5 p.m. They're never late. They're not answering their phone, and it's 1 a.m. and you haven't heard from them. Okay, that's terror-reducing because that's a possible outcome that you have no control over, and you love this person, and this is out of the normal repertoire for their behavior. And it's kind of piecing out those fears, because fear is not a bad thing. Fear has kept us alive. If everyone that's listening to this podcast is from a long line of ancestors that were scared all the time. That's how we survived, because we didn't do things that compromised our safety, and we cared about the other people in our community, so we were afraid for their safety and their well-being, so we took care of them. So fear helps keep us alive. It also can totally derail our happiness and our success. So that's why it's finding that balance through mastery strategies.
Yeah, and it's funny, I'm jumping back to your previous point, but I must admit, because I can't get my head off it partly, but the idea, I've never heard the idea of, and this is my language now, but doing things daily that I typically label as uncomfortable, but to see that as that you're building a muscle around that. I'd never thought of that before. I just more recently realized that it was good for me, but I didn't connect the dots as to why or how it was good for me. It just felt like it was, I guess, making me do more, or do things that otherwise I might procrastinate on.
Yeah.
But the notion that it's a muscle that helps us prepare better for big decisions, because that's what the big leap, I think, for most people typically feels like, whether it's leaving a really bad relationship, or whether it's, like your situation where you're going from a comfortable salaried position to something where there's a ton of risk at stake and you don't really know what's going to come from it. And by the way, I know you didn't mention this, but I think I mentioned that in one of the articles you wrote. I loved a bit about how you waitressing at night while you were doing that class, and I laughed for several reasons, because you said something like, I was always hoping that none of my students would come in to see me there. But because I had the exact same experience in my early days when I was self-employed. I got a job at, I had a couple, but one was at REI, and then one was at Borders, and I remember that the whole time I was there worrying that someone was going to come in as a customer and say, hang on a second, you're supposed to be this successful coach. What are you doing here? Anyway, so I completely related to that. But anyway, as I said, with that whole idea that the muscle piece, I think that's a fantastic way to look at it, and just how compelling and important it is. But then, as you said, also just stop calling everything just stress, or overstating it as I'm overwhelmed, or to actually name exactly what it is. Also, I think is part of fear busting in the way language I would use to some degree, or as a part of that process. So, and again, I also want to acknowledge the perspective that you're putting on this conversation, that not everybody has to feel like they should want to take a big leap. Sometimes maybe we're not focusing enough on what we really want, or we're not clear enough about it. We kind of think we only fit in if we're being this constant A-type, when in fact maybe there are many things going well in our lives, and this is not the time to do that because things are going well, and it might actually mess things up. So I think that's another perspective that I want to thank you for sharing, because it's not, for some reason, that never seems to come up in books. It's all the assumption is always that everybody wants to be a multimillionaire with the great abs or whatever. Whatever cliche I'm throwing out there, but just this notion that everybody, that there's only, like you said, as if there's only one definition of success. So again, I appreciate you putting all these perspectives in place, because I think sometimes, again, we get on this treadmill of assumptions, and admittedly, I assume certain things about people that they wouldn't be tuning into this if they didn't want to move forward. But nonetheless, sometimes it may not be the best decision for everybody. So thank you for kind of, again, putting that perspective onto all of this, because I think that's really important, and that's one of my greatest strengths. I just tend to assume everybody's motoring on, which is absurd, because that's not been true for my whole life either. Anyway, okay, so some other really useful strategies around facing fears, and then again, I keep coming back to the courage concept of the big leap, and yet maybe tell me what I'm missing here. I mean, in other words, am I missing the fact that it's not this big almighty thing for many people, but it's sort of, as you said, I think you used the word evolved earlier. Is it more a process for people that you have seen make big leaps? I guess yes. And then also, do you think it's fair to say that most people don't take big leaps in life?
I would, starting with your first question, and it kind of goes into this practice thing of, in highly competitive markets, which is pretty much like every market now that we have over 7 billion people, it's all about that relationship building. So opportunities are going to come when you have really cultivated relationships and done tiny little things that got nowhere in that moment. And putting yourself out there, going to events where you don't know anyone, maybe hosting your own event, and that may be terrifying in and of itself. As you're building those relationships, which building relationships as an adult, also scary. And so it's easy when you're in school or university, because you have this shared cohesion about what you're doing, and then you're out in the world and everything is totally different. So continue to cultivate those relationships is what will allow you to get those opportunities that you can actually then say, oh, this is a big leap because this is an opportunity that I wasn't presented with before. But generally those big opportunities don't like randomly fall from the sky. There's been a lot of cultivation and putting seeds in the ground and watering and a lot of work that went absolutely nowhere. And that is just part of the process when you're creating something completely new. Now, again, a big leap can mean lots of different things to different people. Maybe a big leap for you is getting married. That's a big leap. That's a big change. Having a child, that's a big leap. That's a big change. And in deciding where you want to put your life's energy, because there's only so many hours a day. We all have a finite amount of time here. Making an impact and how you define that impact is important. Maybe that impact is raising the best kids you possibly can. Mm-hmm. And you shouldn't feel that you need to be on the cover of Forbes to make an impact. Maybe your idea that would fulfill yourself is being on the cover of Forbes. And I think the biggest thing that people struggle with is not really being truthful with themselves. Like you said, when you were doing your journal, like you didn't even talk about your own fears in your own journal that no one's going to read. It's that articulation of what our actual desires are. Because so much we're fed what we think our desires should be. Right. That you should want a degree or be a millionaire or fill in the blank.
It's funny, actually, that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, so I'm glad that you popped back into my head. Social conditioning. How do people get past something like that in order to really accomplish something, more significant than what anyone would have predicted when they were born, based on their upbringing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a wide question depending on what specifically that conditioning is, but in a very general sense, first you just have to even recognize it's a thing. Like you can't start working on something you don't recognize is an issue in the first place. So that comes back to really getting clear, okay, what do you want out of your life? Are you just regurgitating things that people told you should do? Or that, oh, hey, you're good at sports, you should be a professional athlete. Or is it things that you are completely dedicated and honest to saying, this is the thing I really love? And the other piece of that is, what else have you tried? If you grew up being told that you were really good at math, and then you got a degree in math, you became a mathematician, math has always been your jam. Ask yourself, if you're now an adult and you're looking back, did you try anything else? And maybe you don't want to try anything else, right? I enjoy trying all of the buffet of life, mm-hmm. But some people just want the shrimp. And that's totally fine. And accepting if that's making you happy, then you get to decide. That's the cool thing about being an adult is you get to decide what makes you happy. But if you notice, okay, well, I feel like I'm only seeing a couple of colors of the rainbow. Then you start exploring those different things, and you're going to learn lessons you didn't even know you needed to learn, right? Because sometimes it's hard to know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it because either someone shows you a mirror, and it's like, oh, or you see it in some experiential way.
So out of curiosity, I know we need to start to wrap up relatively soon. What do you do that's helped you become more self-aware? Because it's clear that you think about this a great deal and that you've not just reflected, not just learned about it, but reflected, applied it to your own life as well in terms of what you do and don't want. What kinds of specific things do you do that have helped you get better, more self-awareness? Just some practical things.
Yeah, I think for practical things, I love to read. And Audible has been a godsend because I can read tons of books in the car or walking or doing something, right? Having that desire to learn from other people's stories, even if you got 2 things out of a book that were really impactful. I mean, I've had books change my life. So reading is important to me. Getting out of your house, going to shows or immersive experiences or theater that you think wouldn't be something in your lane or something you would enjoy, just go. Mm-hmm. See if you can surprise yourself. And exposing yourself to people that are different from you in any way, shape, or form. Whether that's different in thought, different in discipline or genre. Like, as humans, cognitive bias is really strong, and it will continue if we're not careful and not really adamant about it. We will just keep surrounding ourselves with people and things that are comfortable and that we're used to, and it's a really decided effort to push yourself out of that bias so that you can see new ideas and see the way things are connected. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, I would say, and especially the last one is going to be coming from a place that I know that is deeply entitled because I have the freedom and flexibility of having a job that allows me the ability to travel, but global travel. I mean, there is nothing, and doing it by yourself. I have learned so many lessons just traveling the world by myself and having to force myself to meet new people and being alone in a city that I didn't know and having all of the things that you psychologically go through if you're actually, traveling, not going on a cruise ship where it's just, a floating hotel room. Like, go into these countries, talk with other people, see how other people experience life and how they're finding their own happiness and joy or lack thereof. And it is deeply perspective shifting.
Is there one example that you have that comes to mind the most, either from an experience, a lesson learned from global travel, or you said, I've had books change my life, so I immediately thought, whoa, that's interesting. Can you give us an example? I mean, at least of one of those two.
Yeah, I mean, I have a ton. I'm going to use an example of one of my favorite books. I had no idea who she was before I bought the book, but it's a book called The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And it's a memoir, but there's also a TED Talk that she did called The Art of Asking. And it really chronicled her journey as a indie musician and did Kickstarter and did all of these things, but in such a deep way of talking about her lifestyle choices of couch surfing and traveling the world and doing her art no matter what, and all of these things at the time I didn't even know were on the menu of options for a modern woman. And it was such an eye-opening experience that it talked about another big leap. That was really a galvanizing point for me to take a year and live in London. I sold or gave away all my stuff except for what could fit in a 5x5 box, and I moved to London for a year. And it was by far one of the best experiences. And I don't know if I would have gotten to that point if I didn't have this book that was showing me that it could be done. Mm-hmm. That, this normal person from a normal family and doing, like what we all, normal is kind of a weird, maybe like, not those iconic people that seem so far away, just like an average person that you would maybe have grown up with. Mm-hmm. To see that was possible, that these were opportunities I could create for myself was so revolutionary. And we're totally different fields. Like, she's a musician and being an artist, where I'm, a scientist, an academic, but so much inspiration and alignment that it was truly life-changing.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, so it sounds like she was a great role model in her own way. Maybe you do yourself short shrift. I mean, you're both creators, just in different fields, really, I suspect, too.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, that's fantastic. So 3 final questions before we wrap up. So first one is, who do you think you've become since you started on this journey of kind of not wanting the safe and secure accounts payable position?
I think that, I continued to increase my enjoyment of who I am, but on the flip side, once you start really self-analyzing and digging deeper into things, then, all the skeletons come out. And it's hard work, and it's not always easy. That if I have to kind of like look at different parts of my life, during the time of my life where I was kind of just faking it and not being authentic and just pretending everything was fine, I wasn't able to see the spectrum of humanity, and I wasn't able to feel the massive different emotions that we have access to. So in a way, that was easier. It was easier to just kind of hide in the cave of science and not have to feel those emotions. It's hard work. Emotions are such a pain. Like being a human is hard, and so it's so much better, but it's a lot more work, and vulnerability is really difficult. And I'm happy that I'm down this path, but it's definitely not as easy as just pretending you're happy. Trying to be actually happy is a lot harder than just pretending.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I can definitely relate to that, and I think I've still got a long way to go. But again, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I definitely deliberately chose to stick my neck out by doing this podcast because I want to be doing have more with my life, and I'm 52 now, and so it's but I've kind of decided that for some reason making it public is helpful for me, because otherwise I'm too good at hiding, and I've got this incredibly well-paid lawyer in my head that can continue to convince me not to do much of anything. So no, thank you for that. That's I can completely relate. It's funny because I've heard last week I was at a book signing for someone else I interviewed, and coming from a completely different place in life, he essentially said the same thing. He spent a lot of time repressing many of his emotions, but just talked about how when you do that, it just creates this buffer in your heart, and so you live this very numb life. But he chose, alcohol to continue to numb until more recently, and now he's doing some incredible work with PTSD veterans. So anyway, but thanks for sharing that. So, and then what would be a good first step for people listening, based on kind of what you just said about opening yourself up? Well, that was my interpretation of what you were talking about.
Yeah, I would say do something today that gets you out of that comfort zone, whatever that is. That it's really easy for consumers of this type of genre of, the self-development space to get a buzz, get a high off of the content, and then never actually take any steps to implement it. Mm-hmm. That you get inspired, you go to a Tony Robbins seminar, you're like, yeah, I'm going to change the world, and you get high off of it, and then you don't do anything with it. So it's you learn more in the doing. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I think sometimes we wait too long because, and I'm totally guilty of this, that, I just need to learn more. I just need more information. I just need more steps and strategies before I start doing a thing. That just do the thing. But make it today. Like if you're listening, do the thing today. It doesn't matter what it is. Everyone can find something that'll make them uncomfortable. So whether it's even just talking to a stranger, or applying for a job that that you're not qualified for, but it's something that you're passionate about. Whatever thing is going to make you a little bit uncomfortable, do that thing today. And just kind of be like a researcher in your own mind. Be an observer of, okay, what was the sensations happening before I did the thing? How was it during the thing? How did I feel after the thing? And most likely you're going to feel really empowered that you took control. You said you were going to do a thing. You did the thing. And now you feel accomplished, which is going to help feed those positive emotions around that fearful or anxious activity.
That's great advice. Thank you, Mary. And then lastly, how can listeners keep in touch with you?
So probably the best way, I generally will do talks and workshops around North America, sometimes in London, but really just going to my website, which my name is not easy to spell, but it's marypoffenroth.com. And an easy way to remember it that will have a funnel to it, just go to scienceunicorn.com. And the reason why I had this funny name, in addition to my long last name, which is Poffenroth, is when I'm talking to someone or talking from the stage, my name is not easy to remember or easy to spell, but I'm kind of this weird scientist that does a lot of weird things. So, scienceunicorn.com.
That's funny. My daughter will actually be envious because that's probably one she'd like herself, even though she's only 5. But there's two favourite things, so that's perfect, brilliant. Thank you. So Mary, I'm just going to wrap up here with the audience. So one of the things I always like to say to everyone listening is, again, it's easy to put people on pedestals when we're talking, and again, Mary, I'm so grateful that you've been very real about how you two have off days and struggles and so on, just as we all do. So just again, as you also said, sometimes people can get inspired by somebody's story, and why we want you to, and take action. In other words, you don't have to be. Your life isn't ever perfect in all ways anyway. So now is the best time to start. But don't feel like just because you've heard someone who has done some remarkable things, it's not beyond you at all. And then lastly, thank you so much for listening today, for tuning in. Again, I can't imagine you can get some great ideas, and obviously the key is to do something next. A couple of specific things in terms of the podcast is, if you haven't subscribed, please do. And then in terms of show notes, they're on our website, matt-anderson.com, matt-anderson.com. And with that, I'll sign off with my favourite question, which is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I'm Matt Anderson, and this was The Road Not Taken. Thank you.